I devoted my entire life to others, to a son who once called me his hero, and to a daughter-in-law who saw me as nothing but a burden. After my husband passed away, I built a life from ashes, quietly holding a secret that could shake the very foundation of those who looked down on me. They thought I was just an old, fragile woman living off a pension. But what they didn't know was that behind my silence lay something powerful enough to destroy everything they had built. And the night they tried to erase me from their lives, that was the night their world began to crumble, piece by piece. My name is Jacqueline Hayes, and I'm 70 years old. I live alone in a small apartment on the east side of Chicago, a quiet corner where the world passes by without noticing who still breathes behind old curtains. My mornings always begin the same way: a cup of black coffee, a window half open to the winter air, and the photograph of my son Marcus, resting on the table beside me. His eyes, full of warmth, still follow me across the room, even though it's been 3 days since I buried him. 3 days. And not a single moment has felt real. The house feels empty, yet filled with the echo of voices that once laughed here. People came after the funeral, neighbors, friends, old co-workers. They said kind words, hugged me gently, promised to call. They meant well, I'm sure. But grief has a strange way of isolating you. Once the casseroles stop coming, once the condolences dry up, you're left alone, face to face with silence. My silence has always scared people. They think quietness means weakness. But the truth is, silence can be sharper than any word. It cuts slower, deeper, and leaves no trace until it's too late. Marcus was my only child. I raised him alone after his father, Robert, passed away from a heart attack 30 years ago. Robert was my partner in everything: in love, in work, in building dreams from scratch. Together, we built something few believed in, a company named Ironwood Dynamics, born from nothing but willpower, metal dust, and long nights in a worn-out garage. We started with one machine and one belief: that honest work builds more than products, it builds people. When Robert died, I couldn't bear to see the company without him. The noise, the meetings, the faces chasing profit, it all felt hollow. So, I stepped away. Quietly. I transferred ownership to a family trust under a different name and vanished from the headlines. No interviews, no photographs, no recognition. The world forgot Jacqueline Hayes, and I let it. People think fading away is tragic. I think it's freedom. But my son never forgot who I was. He once asked me, "Mom, why hide what you built?" I told him, because the world praises the loud ones, but it's the quiet hands that build the foundation. He smiled, that same soft smile he had when he was little, and promised he'd keep my secret. And he did. Until the day he married Monica Jenkins. The first time I met Monica, she wore red lipstick, diamond earrings, and the kind of perfume that announces your presence before you enter a room. She was confident, sharp, the kind of woman who could sell you the sky if you doubted your own eyes. But when she shook my hand, I saw it immediately, that tiny flicker of disdain. She looked around my small apartment, taking in the modest couch, the faded curtains, the old carpet Robert had loved. "This is cozy," she said, the word cozy dripping with pity. Marcus, trying to lighten the mood, said, "Mom makes the best peach pie in the city." Monica smiled thinly. "I'm sure she does." It wasn't the words that stung, it was the tone, that quiet judgment hiding beneath politeness. That day, I understood something about her. Monica wasn't cruel by accident. She was cruel because she believed it made her stronger. As the years passed, that quiet disdain grew into open dismissal. She'd interrupt me in conversations, mock my old habits, and treat me like an unwanted shadow in my own son's life. Marcus loved her. I never doubted that. But love can blind even the kindest heart. He always tried to balance things, to make peace between us. But there are some wars no husband can win. Still, I never fought back. I had learned long ago that time reveals character more clearly than any argument ever could. When Aaron, my grandson, was born, I thought God had given me another chance at joy. From the first time I held him, I felt a warmth that stitched the cracks in my soul. He had his father's calm eyes, Robert's steady heartbeat, and a laugh that could light up a room. Aaron loved coming to my place. We'd sit on the porch, fixing small toys, old clocks, even broken lamps. I'd hand him a screwdriver and say, "You see, sweetheart, everything that's broken can be fixed if you take the time to understand how it works." He'd look up at me with curiosity and say, "Grandma, even people?" I smiled. Especially people. But Monica didn't like him spending so much time with me. One evening, she told Marcus, loud enough for me to hear through the wall, "She's filling his head with old ideas. The world doesn't work like that anymore. He needs to learn success, not sympathy." Marcus didn't argue. He just said quietly, "Mom's not teaching him sympathy, Monica. She's teaching him heart." I wish I could tell you things got better after that, but they didn't. When Marcus was diagnosed with cancer, Monica built walls around him, thick, cold, unbreakable. She decided who could visit, who could speak, who could know the details. I wasn't on that list. "This is between immediate family," she told me one afternoon, standing in the hospital corridor like a gatekeeper to my own child. I wanted to scream, to fight, but instead, I sat outside his room every day, same chair, same window. I prayed while nurses walked past me with their pitying glances. The last time I saw my son awake, he reached for my hand and whispered, "Mom, don't fight her. Just wait." His voice was weak, but his eyes still had strength. "You taught me that silence speaks louder than anger. Let it speak now." And so I did. After he passed, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't blame. I didn't cry in public. But when Monica stood at the funeral reception, surrounded by 45 people, friends, family, colleagues, and called me worthless, when she said I had never built anything meaningful in my life, when she looked into my eyes and said, "You're done here, Jacqueline. You're dead to this family," I simply folded my napkin, stood up, and said calmly, "You're right, Monica. I didn't build small things." Then I took out my phone, dialed a number, and said, "Laura, schedule the board meeting for February 12th. The room fell silent. Monica blinked, confused. But I didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. As I walked out of that hall, past the guests, the flowers, and the whispers, I felt something inside me stir. Something that had been asleep for decades. Not revenge. Not anger. Something deeper. Justice. Because sometimes, silence isn't the absence of power. It's the calm before the storm. That night, Chicago's sky looked bruised, heavy clouds rolling over the city like grief itself had decided to stay. I sat in my apartment with the lights off, the only glow coming from the old ironwood dynamics plaque resting against the wall. Dust had gathered around the edges, but the silver letters still shone beneath the lamplight. I traced my fingers over the words, "Built with integrity. Forged with heart." Robert had come up with that slogan on the night we first signed the incorporation papers. He'd said, "If a company is built without heart, it's already rusting." For 30 years, I'd stayed silent about who I really was. People thought I'd faded away, but I was watching, from the shadows, from the sidelines. My name was never on the building anymore, but my hand still signed the checks that kept it standing. Through a trusted legal trustee, Laura Benson, I had quietly kept my majority shares intact. Every year, the dividends were deposited into an anonymous account, untouched, unnoticed. I didn't spend a single cent of it. I didn't need the money, I needed peace. But the night Monica humiliated me in front of my son's friends, my peace no longer mattered. I called Laura the next morning. Is everything ready? I asked. She paused for a moment before answering. It's been ready for years, Jacqueline. I just didn't think you'd ever use it. I closed my eyes and said softly, neither did I. 2 days later, I took the city bus to the Ironwood Dynamics headquarters, the same building I'd helped design decades ago. The glass walls gleamed like ice, tall and proud against the skyline. Employees hurried past me, dressed in sharp suits, holding their coffee cups like armor. None of them recognized me. To them, I was just another old woman passing by, invisible. But invisibility can be a powerful weapon when no one knows you're watching. Inside the lobby, a young receptionist with blonde hair smiled politely. Good morning, ma'am. Do you have an appointment? Yes, I said calmly. With the board. Her brows furrowed slightly. May I have your name? Jacqueline Hayes. The way her expression shifted, from polite to puzzled, made me smile. She typed something quickly, her eyes darting to the screen, then back to me. One moment please, she said, her tone suddenly respectful. Within seconds, she stood up. Right this way, ma'am. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like a journey through time. Every floor I passed reminded me of what I'd built and what I'd left behind. When the doors opened, a familiar face was waiting. Laura Benson, elegant as ever, her silver hair pinned neatly, her presence calm but firm. She smiled. It's been too long, Jacqueline. It has, I said softly. Let's wake them up. In the boardroom, 6 executives sat around a long table, discussing quarterly projections, unaware of the storm walking toward them. Their voices faltered when Laura cleared her throat. Gentlemen, Mrs. Hayes would like a few minutes of your time. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the youngest of them, a man in his 30s, frowned. Mrs. Hayes? As in, the Hayes. Laura smiled faintly. Yes. As in the founder. You could have heard a pin drop. I sat down at the head of the table, the very seat Robert once occupied. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. Don't look so shocked, I said quietly. I may have stepped away, but I never left. One of the older board members leaned forward, clearing his throat. Mrs. Hayes, it's an honor. To what do we owe this visit? I looked at each of them, steady and unflinching. To a reminder, I said. This company wasn't built on numbers. It was built on decency, on honesty. And somewhere along the way, those words became optional. Laura slid a folder across the table. Inside were updated ownership records, sealed legal documents, and share statements. I still hold 52% of this company, I continued. And I'm here to take back my seat. Their faces froze. One man stammered, but we thought. I know what you thought, I interrupted gently. That the woman who built this empire had turned into a ghost. But you were wrong. Ghosts don't vanish. They watch. And when the time is right, they return. Over the next week, the city's business headlines changed. Ironwood Dynamics announces return of its original founder. Industry icon Jacqueline Hayes reclaims her legacy. Monica didn't see it at first. She was too busy redecorating the house, too focused on planning her next social luncheon. But gossip travels fast. Faster than guilt, faster than arrogance. When she finally saw my face on the front page, she dropped her coffee mug. It shattered across the marble floor. The headline below my photograph read, "The woman behind the steal, Jacqueline Hayes returns after 30 years." That same evening, she stormed into my apartment unannounced, her heels clicking like thunder on the floor. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the newspaper in front of me. I didn't look up from my knitting. "That," I said calmly, "is the truth catching up." Her face turned pale. "You lied to us. You made us believe you were poor." I met her eyes. No, Monica. You assumed I was poor. I just never corrected you. She threw the paper onto the floor. Do you think this changes anything? Marcus is gone. You can't fix that. I set my knitting aside, my voice steady but soft. You're right. I can't bring him back. But I can make sure the son he left behind grows up knowing what kind of woman his grandmother really is. Her jaw tightened. You can't take Aaron from me. I stood slowly, my back straight despite the years. I don't need to take him, Monica. You'll push him away all on your own. And I was right. Over the following weeks, things began to shift. Aaron started visiting me more often, first on weekends, then after school. He said he liked the quiet here, the way the world slowed down. Mom's always on the phone, he said once, swinging his legs on the porch. She talks about money all the time. I like it here better. I smiled and handed him a cup of cocoa. You don't need to understand adults yet, sweetheart. Just remember one thing. People who forget kindness end up chasing noise. He tilted his head. What's noise? I looked out the window. Everything that disappears when silence finally speaks. And little did Monica know, that silence had already begun to speak. It began quietly, like most changes in life do. No shouting, no warnings. Just a slow unraveling of something that once seemed solid. Aaron started spending more time with me after school. At first, Monica didn't notice. She was busy attending luncheons, charity events, and social dinners that she thought defined importance. To her, appearances were currency, and she spent them lavishly. But children see what adults try to hide. Aaron saw the arguments, the tension, the way Monica's voice would rise when she talked about me. One evening, he asked her why she never smiled when my name came up. She told him, because some people never earned my respect. Aaron, quiet and thoughtful, just looked down and said, but Grandma never said anything bad about you. That was the first time Monica realized the silence she mocked was turning against her. One Saturday afternoon, Aaron showed up at my apartment with his backpack. His eyes were red, and his voice trembled. Mom told me I can't come here anymore, he said softly. My heart sank. Why, sweetheart? He hesitated, then whispered, she said you're trying to turn me against her. I knelt down beside him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. Aaron, listen to me. I would never do that. You're her son. You should love her. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Then why doesn't she love you? That question cut through me in a way no insult ever could. Because how do you explain to a child that some hearts don't know how to love without control? I hugged him tightly, holding back my tears. She loves you in her own way, I said softly. But love without patience can hurt. He stayed with me for a few hours that day, playing with the same toy car Marcus used to love when he was little. And as he laughed, I saw a reflection of my son, kind, innocent, full of light. That night, after Aaron left, I sat by the window and whispered to Robert's photograph, he has your heart, love. But he's living in her shadow. The next morning, I received an envelope from Laura. Inside was a document, one I hadn't asked for, but one she knew I'd need soon. It was my will, updated and sealed. A note attached in Laura's handwriting read, when the time comes, make sure the right hands receive what was built with love, not greed. I placed the papers in my desk drawer, beside a faded picture of Marcus as a boy. Then I poured myself some coffee and waited, not for revenge, but for truth to ripen. The breaking point came a few weeks later. Monica had applied for a high-level position at Ironwood Dynamics, one that required board approval. She was confident she'd get it. After all, her late husband's family ties gave her leverage. Or so she thought. The boardroom meeting that day was one I'll never forget. She walked in wearing a navy blue blazer, her smile poised, her tone polished. I sat at the far end of the table, my presence a quiet storm waiting to be noticed. When her presentation ended, she said, "I believe my leadership and vision can bring this company into a new era. After all, my husband, Marcus Hayes, was part of this family legacy." I folded my hands calmly. "Yes," I said softly, "he was. And that legacy is exactly why I cannot, in good conscience, approve your position." The room went still. Her head snapped toward me, disbelief flashing across her face. "You what?" I met her eyes. "This company wasn't built on arrogance, Monica. It was built on humility. And I can't allow someone who disrespects her own family to lead the one I created." Her voice shook. "You're doing this out of spite." I leaned forward slightly. "No. I'm doing this out of memory. For Marcus, for Robert, and for every worker who believed in integrity. I built this company from the ground up with men and women who respected their roots. You burned yours." Her cheeks flushed with rage. "You can't talk to me like this in front of them." I smiled faintly. "Then perhaps you should have thought twice before talking to me like that in front of 50 guests at your husband's funeral." That night, Monica stormed home, furious. She called me repeatedly. I didn't answer. She sent messages filled with blame, denial, bitterness. But I'd learned something long ago. Angry people hate silence more than words. Meanwhile, Aaron was sitting on the staircase, listening. He heard every word his mother shouted that evening, the resentment, the cruelty. And something in him broke. Later that night, when she finally calmed down, he walked into her room holding a small framed picture of Marcus. "Mom," he said quietly, "Grandma didn't ruin anything. You did." Monica froze, the air leaving her lungs. "What did you say?" He looked straight at her. "Dad would never have wanted you to treat her that way. He told me once. Grandma was his hero." She slapped the picture out of his hand. It fell, glass shattering across the floor. Aaron didn't cry. He just whispered, "You don't even deserve to say his name." And with that, he walked out of the room. The next morning, I woke to a knock on my door. When I opened it, Aaron stood there with his school bag and his teddy bear. He looked up at me and said, "Can I stay here for a while, Grandma?" I felt my heart stop, not out of fear, but out of something pure, something healing. I pulled him close, holding him like I'd held Marcus so many years ago. "You can stay as long as you need, sweetheart." That night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked at me sleepily and said, "You know, Grandma, when I grow up, I want to build something too." I smiled. "What will you build, baby?" He yawned. "Something that makes people remember to be kind." I brushed his hair and whispered, "Then you'll build something better than I ever did." And as I turned off the light, I realized something. Maybe I hadn't lost everything after all. Because sometimes, when blood turns away from cruelty, it returns to love. By the time spring came to Chicago, the air around Monica Jenkins had changed. The same people who once admired her polished smile and designer heels now whispered when she passed. The social circles she had fought so hard to enter began to close their doors one by one. Quietly, politely, but firmly. It started with an article. One of the city's business magazines ran a feature on Ironwood Dynamics' founding legacy, complete with old photographs of Robert and me, side by side, working in that tiny garage from decades ago. The headline read, "The Hidden Hands Behind Chicago's Steel Empire, the Forgotten Woman Who Built Ironwood." And there, on the second page, was a small caption beneath my picture. "Jacqueline Hayes, original founder and current majority shareholder." For most people, it was just another corporate story. But for Monica, it was a mirror. one that reflected every cruel word she'd ever said about me. That same week, her phone stopped ringing. The same friends who used to invite her to brunch began posting pictures without her. Her calls went unanswered. Her charity committee quietly restructured, leaving her name off the list. But Monica wasn't the kind of woman who accepted silence. She fought it. And in doing so, she made herself louder and more alone. One afternoon, while Aaron was doing his homework at my kitchen table, I heard a car screech outside. Then came the sharp, familiar sound of high heels on pavement. Before I could open the door, Monica burst in, her eyes wild, her lipstick smudged. "You turned everyone against me," she screamed. "You ruined my life." Aaron froze, his pencil trembling in his hand. I stood, my voice calm but firm. "Lower your voice. There's a child in the room." She stepped closer. "You think you've won? You think people actually care about you now? You're just an old woman hiding behind your son's memory." Her words were meant to sting, but they only echoed off the walls powerless. I'd heard worse, from life, from loss, from pain. I met her eyes and said softly, "No, Monica. I'm standing behind the truth. It doesn't need to shout." Aaron stood up then, his little voice trembling but brave. "Mom, stop yelling at Grandma." Monica turned to him. "Aaron, you don't understand what she's done," he interrupted her, louder this time. "I understand enough. You're mean to her for no reason. Dad wouldn't like it." Her face went white. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock. She whispered, "Aaron, come with me. We're going home." He shook his head. "No." That one word, small, soft, and certain, broke her more than anything else could have. She tried to reach for him, but he stepped back, holding onto my arm. "Please leave," I said gently. "He needs peace right now. And so do you." Monica stood there for a moment, breathing hard, her hands shaking. Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard that one of the picture frames fell off the wall. Aaron flinched. I bent down, lifted the broken frame, and looked at the photo inside, a picture of Marcus holding him as a baby. I smiled sadly. "Even glass breaks when there's too much pressure, sweetheart. But the picture inside, it survives." He nodded quietly. "Just like us." "Yes," I whispered. "Just like us." Over the next few weeks, Monica tried everything to get Aaron back. Angry calls, emotional pleas, even threats of legal action. But when Child Services reviewed the situation, it didn't go her way. I still remember the day of the custody hearing. The courtroom smelled of old paper and coffee, the kind of place where lives quietly change forever. Monica wore a crisp white suit and spoke with practiced sadness, calling herself a misunderstood mother. Her lawyer painted me as an aging widow with no stability. But then came the moment that shifted everything. The judge looked down at Aaron and asked gently, "Son, where would you feel safest living?" Aaron didn't hesitate. He turned toward me and said softly, "With my grandma." The silence that followed was louder than any verdict. Monica's face went pale. Her shoulders slumped. The judge nodded slowly and said, "Then it's decided. Aaron Hayes will remain under the guardianship of Mrs. Jacqueline Hayes until further review." Monica's breath caught, and tears filled her eyes, not of love but of defeat. She looked at me as if realizing, for the first time, that arrogance has consequences. Outside the courthouse, she tried to speak to me. Her voice cracked, her words shaking between anger and regret. "You've taken everything from me." I looked at her for a long moment and replied, "No, Monica. You gave it away, piece by piece, every time you chose pride over love." She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, slowly, like a woman carrying the weight of her own mistakes. That evening, Aaron and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. He leaned against me and said, "Grandma, why was Mom crying?" I sighed softly. Because sometimes, when people realize what they've lost, their tears come too late. He nodded, resting his head on my shoulder. "Will she ever be happy again?" he asked. I looked out at the fading light. "Maybe one day, when she learns that happiness isn't built from money or pride, it's built from peace." He thought for a moment, then said, "Like yours." I smiled. "Exactly like mine." But deep inside, I knew Monica's story wasn't over yet. Because guilt has a strange way of resurfacing, and pride, once broken, always tries to rebuild itself. Even if it has to destroy what's left of the heart to do it. And the storm that was about to come next would test not just her redemption, but mine too. Summer had arrived in Chicago, and with it came the sound of life. Children playing in the distance, cicadas humming, the faint rhythm of trains passing through the city. But for Monica Jenkins, that summer was the quietest one of her life. She had lost her job, her friends, her reputation, and now her son. The large house she once filled with parties and laughter now echoed with emptiness. She still set 2 plates at the table, one for herself, one for Aaron, but the chair across from her remained untouched. Dust gathered where love used to live. She spent her days pacing, staring at her phone, waiting for a message that never came. Sometimes she'd call just to hear his voice, but I never let the bitterness control me. I would answer gently and hand the phone to Aaron. "Hi, Mom," he'd say softly. "I'm okay." She'd ask, "Do you miss me?" He'd pause and reply, "I do, but I like it here. Grandma's teaching me how to build things." It wasn't said with cruelty, just truth. And truth, no matter how softly spoken, can be the loudest pain of all. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, I was in the kitchen making peach pie, the same one Marcus loved as a boy. Aaron sat nearby, reading a book about engines, his small fingers tracing the diagrams like he was decoding the world. The knock at the door was unexpected. When I opened it, Monica stood there. Not in her usual perfection, but pale, exhausted, and trembling. The woman who once wore arrogance like a crown now looked like a ghost of herself. "Monica," I said quietly, "come in." She hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You already have," I replied softly, moving aside. "But maybe it's time you did." She stepped inside slowly, her eyes darting around the small living room, the same one she once called embarrassing. Now it seemed to humble her. Aaron came running from the kitchen. "Mom." He froze mid-step, unsure of what to do. I gave him a small nod. "Go ahead, sweetheart." He hugged her tightly. For a moment, her pride broke. She clung to him like a drowning woman holding onto air. "I've missed you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I missed you too," he said, his eyes wet. "But you were so mad all the time." Monica looked at me then, truly looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that had never been there before, remorse. After Aaron went to his room, we sat across from each other at the table. The silence between us was heavy, but not hostile. It was the silence of 2 women finally standing at the edge of truth. She took a deep breath. "I don't know where to start." "Start where it hurts," I said softly. She wiped her eyes. "When Marcus got sick, I was terrified. I thought if I controlled everything, the doctors, the visitors, even you, I could control the outcome. I was wrong. And when he died, I blamed you because I needed someone to hate." Her voice trembled. "But I see now. I hated you because I saw everything in you that I never could be." I didn't speak. I just listened, because sometimes, listening is the only mercy we can give. "I told myself you were weak," she continued. "That you were old, irrelevant, useless. But then I found out who you really were. And it made me feel smaller than I've ever felt in my life." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you that I'm sorry." I took a deep breath and said quietly, "Monica, forgiveness isn't something I give because someone asks. It's something I give when I see that pain has finally taught them what pride never could. And I see that in you now." She looked at me, surprised. "So, you forgive me?" I shook my head gently. "Not yet. But this is the first step." As she prepared to leave, Aaron came out with a folded drawing in his hand. "Mom," he said, "I made this for you." It was a picture of 3 people standing under a big sun, him in the middle, holding both our hands. Underneath, he had written in crooked letters, "Love is when you stop being mad and start being kind again." Monica's lips trembled. She knelt, hugging him tightly. "That's beautiful," she whispered. He smiled innocently. "Grandma said kindness is the only thing that doesn't rust." She turned to look at me again, and this time she smiled. Not with superiority, not with bitterness, but with something human. "He's right," she said softly. "And I think I'm ready to start again." That night, after they left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, looking up at the stars. The city lights blurred the sky, but a few brave stars still managed to shine through. Robert used to say, "You can't fix people by punishing them. You fix them by letting the truth hurt just long enough to change them." Maybe that's what this was. Not revenge, not justice, but transformation. The next morning, Monica called. "I'm starting therapy," she said. "And I've been volunteering at the women's shelter. They need someone who knows how to rebuild." I smiled faintly. "That sounds like a good start." Then she added, "I was hoping maybe Aaron could see me on weekends?" I paused, looking at Aaron playing with the old wrench on the porch, just like Marcus used to. "Yes," I said softly. "He'll be happy to." Over the months that followed, things began to heal. Not perfectly, but honestly. Monica never became the woman I once wished she'd be, but she became someone better. Someone aware of her flaws, humbled by loss, and softened by love. One day she came to visit with a small gift, a silver bracelet with 3 charms, one for Marcus, one for Aaron, and one shaped like a small gear. "For the woman who built everything," she said quietly. I took her hand and said, "No, Monica. For the woman who finally learned to rebuild herself." That evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, Aaron looked up at me and said, "Grandma, are we happy now?" I smiled, feeling Robert's spirit in the wind. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." Because in the end, silence had spoken, not through revenge or punishment, but through understanding. And for the first time in a long time, the house was filled not with pride, not with sorrow, but with peace. 10 years passed, and life in Chicago took on a quieter rhythm. Seasons came and went, each one marking another year of healing, another chapter of peace. I was now 80 years old, and though my body had slowed, my spirit had only grown stronger. The little apartment that once felt like a cage of memories had turned into a home filled with laughter again. Aaron was no longer a boy. He was a young man now, 20 years old, tall like his father, thoughtful like his grandfather, and gentle like the child I had once held close through storms of grief. Every morning, he'd visit me before going to the university. He was studying mechanical engineering, determined to rebuild the legacy his father never got to finish. "Grandma," he often said with that same spark Marcus used to have, "I don't want to just work at Ironwood Dynamics. I want to make it better." Every time he said that, my heart swelled with pride. The company was in good hands again, not because of blood or name, but because of heart. Monica, too, had changed over the years. She had sold the big house, moved into a smaller place, and dedicated her time to helping young single mothers find jobs. She and I never became best friends, but we found something better: mutual respect. Every Sunday, she'd come over for dinner. Erin would joke, "The two strongest women I know finally share a kitchen. The world should be afraid." And we'd all laugh, because the bitterness that once poisoned our lives had finally lost its power. One evening, as we sat together at the dinner table, Monica looked at me and said quietly, "I used to think strength meant control. But you taught me that strength is grace under fire." I smiled and replied, "And you taught me that even pride can learn humility if it's given time." Erin listened, smiling between us like the bridge we both had been waiting for. After dinner, he brought out a small box and handed it to me. Inside was a silver gear pendant with my initials engraved. "JH, it's from the workshop I built at the university," he said proudly. "They gave me an award for innovation." I held it in my trembling hands and whispered, "Your grandfather would have been so proud." He smiled. "I know, Grandma. You built him too." My eyes filled with tears. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I just kept his dream alive long enough for you to find it." That night, after they both left, I sat alone by the window with the pendant in my hand. The city lights shimmered below, reflections dancing across the glass, and I could almost hear Robert's voice whisper through the wind, "You did it, Jackie. You built more than a company. You built a legacy." I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the years settle gently in my chest. My life hadn't been perfect, but it had been full of love, loss, forgiveness, and redemption. I realized then that true success isn't measured by wealth or recognition, but by the peace you leave behind in the hearts you've healed. And as I watched the last traces of daylight fade, I smiled and whispered, "Iron may rust, but love never does." 2 years later, when I turned 82, I started feeling my strength fade little by little. My hands, once steady enough to build machines and cradle newborns, now trembled when I poured my morning coffee. But my mind remained sharp, and my heart still carried a calm kind of pride, the kind that comes from surviving storms without losing yourself. I knew time was quietly preparing to take me home. I didn't fear it. I had already made peace with life, but I wasn't ready to leave without saying the things that mattered most. So, I began to write. Not a speech, not a will, a letter. A letter for Erin, sealed in an envelope with my name written in small, careful handwriting, to be opened when I'm gone. I wanted him to know the truth about everything: the sacrifices, the love, the mistakes, and the forgiveness that shaped who we became. I wrote for days, sometimes stopping to wipe tears, sometimes smiling at memories that time could never erase. In that letter, I told him about the first time I held him, the fear I felt when I thought I might lose him to his mother's anger, and the pride I felt the day he became the man I always hoped he'd be. I told him that forgiveness is not weakness, but freedom. That love doesn't mean forgetting, it means understanding. And that the greatest revenge in life is peace, because nothing unsettles a cruel heart more than seeing the one they tried to break still standing in grace. I ended the letter with a few words Robert used to whisper to me in our hardest days: "The metal bends, but it never breaks. Neither did you." Months later, one cold December night, as snow fell softly outside, I felt something inside me slow down. I sat in my armchair near the window, watching the lights flicker across the street. Erin had promised to come by in the morning with breakfast and a story about his new project. I smiled at the thought. I whispered a quiet prayer, my hands resting on the arm of the chair, and closed my eyes. That's how they found me, peaceful, smiling, as if I had simply decided to rest. At my funeral, there were no grand speeches, no cold rituals, just warmth. People from the company came, workers I hadn't seen in years, women I'd mentored, even the janitor who'd worked at Ironwood since the beginning. They didn't speak about business. They spoke about kindness. Monica stood near the front, tears streaming down her face. She placed a single white rose on my coffin and whispered something no one else could hear. Later, she told Aaron she had said, "Thank you for saving me from myself." After everyone left, Aaron returned home and sat at my old desk. He saw the envelope, the one I had left with his name. His hands shook as he opened it. He read my words slowly, his tears falling onto the paper, but he didn't stop. When he reached the last line, he folded the letter and pressed it to his chest. Then he said softly, "I'll keep building, Grandma. I promise." That night he went to the garage, the same one where Robert and I once built Ironwood's first machine, and hung the letter on the wall. Right above his workbench, he placed a small plaque that read, "Forged in Love, the Hayes Legacy." From that day on, he worked not just for success, but for meaning. Every invention, every project, every dream carried a piece of me, of us. And though I was gone, my silence still spoke through him. Because love doesn't end when the heart stops beating. It lingers, in words, in memories, in every act of kindness left behind. Years later, people would ask Aaron where he found the strength to keep going through loss and pain. He'd always smile and say, "From a woman who taught me that even silence can roar." 10 more years passed, and the name Ironwood Dynamics had transformed again, this time under Aaron Hayes, the grandson of a woman the world had nearly forgotten. The small engineering company that once started in a cramped garage now stood tall in downtown Chicago, gleaming glass windows reflecting the skyline that had witnessed generations of both pride and pain. But inside the company, on the ground floor, there was one wall that never changed, a tribute wall. In its center hung a large black and white photograph of me, Jacqueline Hayes, standing beside Robert, grease on our hands, smiles on our faces. Underneath the photo was a brass plate engraved with the words, "Built by hands that refuse to quit." Every year, Aaron hosted a mentorship program for young engineers, not the wealthy or well-connected, but the ones who reminded him of how I once lived, quiet, humble, full of potential. "My grandmother believed genius was everywhere," he'd tell the crowd. "It just needed someone to see it." His voice always carried calm authority, not arrogance, the kind that came from generations of resilience. And among those young students sat Monica, now older, gray-haired but still graceful, smiling with tears in her eyes every time he spoke. She volunteered at the event every year, helping new students find their place. After the ceremony one evening, Aaron and Monica sat together in my old workshop, the same one that had been restored in my honor. It smelled of metal and sawdust, just like the old days. "Mom," Aaron said softly, "you know what Grandma used to say about rust?" Monica smiled faintly. "That it only appears when something's been forgotten." He nodded. "Then I guess she'll never rust. Not while I'm here." There was silence for a moment, the kind that didn't hurt anymore, the kind that felt like peace. Monica reached into her purse and took out a small velvet pouch. "I've been keeping this for years," she said, handing it to him. Inside was the same silver gear pendant he had given me decades ago, polished and shining. "It belongs to you now." Aaron looked at it, tears glistening in his eyes. "I gave this to her the day she told me what love really meant." "And she gave it back to you," Monica whispered. "In every way that mattered." He fastened the pendant around his neck and took a deep breath. "You know, Mom," he said, "I used to think Grandma's greatest strength was what she built. But now I realize it was what she rebuilt, in us." Monica smiled through her tears. "She rebuilt me too." They stood in silence for a while, both looking at the framed photo on the wall, me and Robert, smiling forever through time. Then Monica said softly, "Do you think she'd be proud of us?" Aaron chuckled, brushing a tear away. "She already was. She just wanted us to find it out for ourselves." That night, after everyone left, the lights dimmed in the workshop, leaving only the soft glow of a single bulb hanging above the workbench. The pendant around Erin's neck caught the light, and for a moment, the reflection danced across the old photograph, right where my smile was frozen in time. It was as if the past had winked at the present, whispering, "You did it." Outside, the wind rustled gently through the trees. Chicago slept under the stars, unaware that in one quiet workshop, the legacy of a forgotten woman still lived, still breathed and still taught, that love never fades and true power never needs to shout. Because even after a lifetime of silence, Jacqueline Hayes was still speaking, through every heart she had ever healed, every life she had ever touched, and every soul that had finally learned the same truth she carried till her last breath: real strength doesn't roar, it endures. It was a bright morning in Chicago, the kind of morning where sunlight cuts through glass towers and turns the river gold. On that day, something extraordinary happened. The city council announced that Ironwood Avenue, the long street leading to the industrial district, would be renamed Hayes Boulevard in honor of Jacqueline Hayes, the woman who built more than machines, who built people. It had been 30 years since I'd passed, yet my story still lived in whispers and workshops, in classrooms and family homes. And now, it would live forever in the streets of the city I loved. When Aaron received the letter, he couldn't hold back his tears. He drove straight to the small house where I once lived, the one I had refused to sell, even when times were hard. It stood quiet now, surrounded by tall buildings, like a stubborn memory refusing to fade. Monica joined him there. Together they unlocked the old wooden door. Inside, everything was still as I had left it: the rocking chair by the window, the old clock that had stopped the day I took my last breath, and the faint scent of lavender oil that lingered in the air. Aaron ran his fingers along the dusty shelf where my framed photo still stood. "She'd laugh at this," he said quietly. "She never wanted her name on anything." Monica smiled sadly. "Maybe. But she earned it more than anyone." That afternoon, the ceremony took place on the steps of City Hall. Engineers, factory workers, local families, people from every walk of life gathered to honor the woman whose silent strength had shaped them all. A bronze statue was unveiled, me, holding a wrench in one hand and a book in the other, my head slightly tilted upward as if still planning something new. Beneath it was a single engraved line: "She built with her hands, but changed the world with her heart." Aaron stepped up to the microphone, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "When I was 6 years old, my grandmother taught me that kindness is the only thing that doesn't rust. I didn't understand then what she meant. But I do now. She showed me that you can build machines, you can build empires, but if you don't build people, you've built nothing." The crowd fell silent, moved beyond words. This street, this statue, this company, they're not monuments to power. They're reminders that love and dignity are the strongest forces we'll ever know. As the mayor handed him a framed certificate, Aaron turned to the statue and whispered under his breath, "You were right, Grandma. The world finally heard your silence." Monica stood a few steps away, tears streaming down her face, but her lips curved in a peaceful smile. She had lived long enough to see redemption, her own and mine. She leaned toward Aaron and said softly, "I think she's smiling right now." Aaron nodded. "No," he said with a quiet grin. "She's laughing." When the ceremony ended, Aaron and Monica walked down the new Hayes Boulevard together. The city's heartbeat pulsed around them, the sound of engines, laughter, life moving forward. And in that hum of progress, they could almost hear my voice, warm, patient, eternal, whispering the same truth I had lived and died by: keep building, even when no one believes you can. That night, when the lights dimmed across Chicago, the bronze statue of Jacqueline Hayes stood beneath the moonlight, casting a long shadow across the boulevard. It wasn't the shadow of pride but of legacy, a legacy forged in humility, tempered by love, and strengthened by time. And though decades had passed, those who walked that road would always pause to read the words beneath her name, and remember that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, and lasts forever. Years rolled on, and Chicago changed again. New buildings, new people, new names. But one thing never changed: the story of Jacqueline Hayes. Schools began teaching about her as one of the city's most influential innovators. Not because she was a woman, or because she was black, or even because she founded Ironwood Dynamics, but because she proved something timeless: that true power needs no applause. It just needs purpose. Every year on the anniversary of my death, Aaron hosted what he called the Day of Hands. It wasn't a holiday, not officially, just a gathering of engineers, builders, students, and dreamers from all over the country. They met at the Ironwood Center to create things for people who had nothing: prosthetic arms for children, wheelchair motors for veterans, solar lamps for single mothers who worked night shifts. Each year, Aaron would start the day by holding up an old rusted wrench, my wrench, and saying, "This is where everything began." With one tool, one woman, and one promise: to never stop fixing what's broken. By then, Aaron was in his 50s, with streaks of silver in his hair and the same kind smile I once saw in his father Marcus. His own children stood beside him: a girl named Grace and a boy named Robert, both carrying the spark of something unbreakable. They'd grown up hearing my name like a bedtime story, and when they visited the statue on Hayes Boulevard, they would place small paper flowers near its base. Grace once asked her father, "Daddy, why did Grandma never give up?" Aaron smiled, kneeling beside her. "Because some people build for money," he said, "but your great-grandma built for love. And love never quits." In the years that followed, Ironwood Dynamics expanded across states, still guided by Aaron's vision, which he often said wasn't his at all but mine. He turned down massive buyout offers, refusing to let the company lose its soul. On the wall of every factory, every training center, every classroom sponsored by the company, one sentence was written in bold letters: "Never let the world convince you that kindness is weakness." That line became Ironwood's motto, its identity, the pulse of its people. And one day, many years later, when Aaron's time also came, he asked to be buried next to me and Robert, in the quiet cemetery overlooking the river. At his funeral, Grace stood before hundreds of people, engineers, politicians, and workers, and held up that same old wrench. Her voice trembled, but her words carried the same calm strength that had once lived in me. "My great-grandmother taught my father something he taught me: that silence isn't the absence of strength. It's where real strength begins." She didn't raise her voice to be heard. She built her voice in everything she touched. When the service ended, the family walked away as the sun set over Chicago, painting the skyline gold. The bronze statue on Hayes Boulevard shimmered in that fading light, and for a brief, quiet moment, it almost looked alive, like it was smiling at everything it had created. And so, my story came full circle, from the woman they called useless, irrelevant, invisible, to the woman whose silence still teaches the world what power truly means. Because some stories aren't written to be loud, they're written to last. And mine will echo forever, in every bolt turned, in every life rebuilt, and in every heart that learns that love once forged never rusts.